The first thing I noticed when I arrived at that old house was the smell, an aroma of aged wood and forgotten things. The facade was a true Gothic masterpiece, with its pointed towers and arched windows that seemed to watch me. A strange sensation coursed through my body, as if the house's eyes were fixed on me, evaluating every movement. It was as if I were being examined by a living being, a spirit that was part of that century-old structure. "Jake, did you really move here?" I murmured to myself as a chill ran down my spine. I had always dreamed of living in a place like this, but now, with reality knocking at the door, excitement mingled with a slight fear. The sun was beginning to set, casting long and distorted shadows across the neglected garden. The tall, dry grass seemed to whisper ancient secrets. I stepped inside the house, pushing the creaking door that sounded as if it were complaining about being opened. The interior was as fascinating as the exterior. Walls adorned with faded wallpaper, furniture covered with white sheets, and a crystal chandelier swaying gently with the breeze, as if it were dancing a solitary waltz. My eyes wandered across the walls, trying to decipher the echoes of past lives. "Wow, this is amazing," I said aloud, trying to break the silence that had settled. The echo of my voice seemed to get lost in the air, as if the house were absorbing my words. The first night was peaceful, but as I lay down, the feeling of being watched returned, more intense than before. I closed my eyes and tried to relax, but restlessness kept me awake. It was then that I heard it, a low, whispering voice that seemed to come from the hallway. "Jake," it called, an echo that was both familiar and disturbing. My heart raced, and I got up from the bed, drawn to the sound. The hallway was shrouded in darkness, and I hesitated. "Who is there?" I asked, my voice trembling. Silence answered, but then the voice called again, "Jake," and despite the fear forming in my chest, I stepped toward the sound. The hallway was filled with dancing shadows, old frames, and portraits with empty gazes that followed me. I walked slowly, my feet making noise on the creaking wooden floor. The shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and stretching on the walls. "This is just my imagination," I tried to convince myself, but the voice persisted, "Jake." I followed it, like a wolf drawn to a call. Then, at the end of the hallway, everything fell silent. The voice had vanished, and I found myself in front of an ajar door, moonlight filtering through the gap. As I cautiously pushed the door open, I discovered a dusty attic. The air was heavy, and the smell of mildew was unmistakable. What caught my attention the most was a diary, covered in dust, resting on an old table. With trembling hands, I opened it, revealing yellowed pages and handwritten notes. The disappearances began in the spring of 1923. I read softly as the tragic story of former residents unfolded before me. Each sentence pulled me deeper into the shadows of the past. "The house, it is full of secrets," I murmured, feeling a mix of curiosity and dread growing within me. As I read, I realized that the stories within that diary were not just of tragedies, but of lost souls tied to a dark fate. What had I gotten myself into? The weight of the house's history began to settle on my shoulders, and the voice I had heard earlier echoed in my mind, like a distant call, a connection I still did not understand. "Jake," the voice whispered again, and I knew there was no turning back. The house was alive, and I was now part of its narrative. What else would I discover in this place? I decided I needed to learn more about the house that was now my home. The heavy atmosphere and the echoes of lost voices beckoned me, as if the very structure were alive, pulsing with stories that refused to remain in the past. With the diary in hand, I sat down at the kitchen table, a place that smelled of old wood and had a faint touch of dampness. The yellowed pages told me about souls that wandered, leaving traces of pain and unresolved tragedies. "Jake, what are you doing there?" Sarah's voice pulled me out of my concentration. I looked at the door, and there she was, with her hair down and a curious look on her face. "I'm trying to figure out what happened here," I replied, showing her the diary. "You won't believe the things I read." She leaned closer, peering at the pages. Her eyes sparkled with the same intensity one felt while uncovering the house's mysteries. "What did you find?" she asked, sitting across from me and crossing her arms, as if she wanted to absorb all the information I had. "It talks about a tragic event. Several souls lost their lives here," I explained, running my hand over the notes. "It says they are trapped, as if they can't move on." Sarah frowned, and a shadow of concern passed over her face. "That's scary, Jake. Have you thought that maybe the house is trying to communicate with you?" Her voice was soft, but there was a firmness that didn't go unnoticed. "I heard my own voice, Sarah," I confessed, remembering the chill that ran through me when that happened. "Calling my name. I went to check, but I only found shadows." Sarah fell silent, and I could see she was processing my words. What I wanted was for her to say that all of this was just imagination, that the house was just an old, dusty building. But I knew that wasn't true. There was something more, something that connected me to this place. "We need to learn more about the history of the house," she finally said. "Maybe there's a record in some local library, or even in historical archives." The idea of leaving the house to find answers excited me, but at the same time, a fear whispered within me. What was hiding in the shadows? What did these souls want from me? That night, as I tried to sleep, my body became a battleground between exhaustion and anxiety. I closed my eyes, but visions began to appear. Dark figures floated around me, their faces indistinct, but their gazes heavy, as if they wanted to tell me something but were trapped in a silent scream. "What do you want?" I murmured, desperate. However, the only answer I received was the echo of my own voice, repeating my name like a mantra. I got out of bed, feeling the need to investigate further. With cautious steps, I walked down the dark hallway. The moonlight filtered through the windows, creating patterns that danced on the walls. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I could almost feel their presence, the souls wandering, lost in their own stories. An old portrait caught my attention in the living room. It was a framed painting, blurred by time, but there was something familiar about that face. It was as if I were looking at a distorted reflection of myself. My heart raced. What did this mean? How could there be a connection between me and that figure? This can't be a coincidence. I spoke aloud, as if the walls could answer me. "Who were you?" The house seemed to whisper back, and a sense of despair settled in me. I got up and went back to the diary, flipping through the pages in search of answers. With every line I read, the connection became stronger, and I felt that somehow these souls were linked to my past. "Jake, are you okay?" Sarah suddenly appeared, and I turned, catching her by surprise. "I don't know." My voice was tense. "I feel like I'm getting lost here." She moved closer, placing her hand on my shoulder. "Let us figure this out together. You don't have to face this alone." The warmth of her presence was comforting, a reminder that, despite the darkness, there was light. But deep down, I knew the truth was darker than we could imagine. And as the night unfolded, I realized that the house not only held secrets, it demanded them. And I was about to become part of this story. Hours passed, but the sun didn't seem to move. I sat at the table, books scattered around me, trying to focus on anatomy studies, but my mind was a whirlwind. The pages became smudges, the words echoing in a distant lament. Each time I tried to delve into the details of arteries and veins, a voice whispered, almost inaudible, but clear enough to make my heart race. "Jake, stop it," I muttered to myself, rubbing my temples with my fingers. The silence of the house was oppressive, and the weight of an invisible gaze seemed to follow me. I looked out the window, watching the leaves of the trees gently sway in the wind. Twilight was approaching, bringing with it a sense of foreboding. The shadows were starting to stretch, giving life to figures dancing in my mind. It was then that my phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from Sarah. "Hey Jake, how are you? Ready for our investigation at the house?" A chill ran down my spine. The idea of sharing this burden with someone was both a relief and a weight. I took a deep breath and replied, "I am. Can we meet later?" Later, as the daylight began to fade, Sarah arrived. She was radiant, with a smile that lit up the room, but the worry in her eyes did not go unnoticed by me. "You look pale. What happened?" she asked as she entered the room. "It's just the house. Sometimes I feel like I'm not alone here," I confessed, hesitating over my words. What would I say to someone who didn't know the true essence of that place? "I hear whispers, as if something is calling me." Sarah frowned, a mix of curiosity and concern. "That's strange. I've heard some stories about the house too, but I never thought you might be going through this. Let's find out what's happening." It was comforting to know I wasn't alone in this search. We both decided to explore the university library's archives, where we uncovered more about the house's former residents. Stories of tragedies, disappearances, and tormented souls wandering restlessly. One in particular caught our attention, an ancient ritual that could free these souls, but required a personal sacrifice. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Sarah asked, her gaze fixed on me. The idea of the ritual hung in the air like a dense fog. "If we do this, we might help the souls. But what do you think that means for you?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. The idea of sacrificing something of myself is terrifying. What if I can't handle what that means? We need to know more. What if this is the key to understanding what's happening to you? And to the house? Sarah insisted, her determination almost contagious. The conversation flowed between us, but anxiety grew inside me. I didn't want to face the demons that haunted my past, but the idea of freeing those souls drew me in. What would I have to lose? I was willing to find out. Night fell, and we decided to return to the house. The air was heavy, the atmosphere charged with palpable expectation. As we entered, the old wood creaked beneath our feet, and the darkness seemed to close in around us. "Jake, are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, hesitating at the door. "I don't know, but we need to try," I replied, my heart racing. As we crossed the threshold, a feeling of déjà vu enveloped me. It was as if the walls were whispering ancient secrets, and every step we took reverberated in my mind. As we explored the rooms, the echoes of whispers began to intensify. "Jake, Jake," the voice called, and I felt I needed to listen. "What do you want from me?" I asked aloud, but only silence answered me. Fear began to mix with determination. "We need to know what's behind this," Sarah said, her hand firmly holding mine. "If you're hearing your own voice, maybe it means there's something in you that needs to be resolved." "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I replied, anxiety turning into a knot in my stomach. But at the same time, I felt like I was at a crossroads. The lost souls were asking for help, and maybe deep down I was asking too. Focusing, I made an effort to silence the echoes. If I wanted to understand that house and myself, I would need to confront what was hidden beneath the surface. "Let's discover this together," I declared, feeling a spark of courage. Sarah nodded, and together, we plunged into the night, ready to unravel the mysteries of that haunted house. The full moon rose in the sky, illuminating the old house with a silver glow that accentuated its shadows. I felt increasingly restless, as if the walls were breathing, holding secrets that cried out to be revealed. The presence in the house became palpable. In moments of silence, I could hear whispers and murmurs, as if the lost souls were preparing for something. Anxiety gnawed at me, and at the same time, a kind of morbid curiosity drew me toward the unknown. On a particularly intense night, I couldn't resist. With a flashlight in hand, I decided to descend into the basement. Each step creaked under my weight, as if the house was protesting my descent. The air grew colder as I approached the bottom. When I arrived, the flashlight illuminated a dusty space filled with abandoned objects. Old furniture, decomposing boxes, and in the center, a table covered by a torn cloth. "Jake, are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah's voice echoed in my mind. She had offered to accompany me, but I knew this was a journey I needed to undertake alone. The weight of my thoughts was oppressive, and I needed to uncover what that house wanted to show me. With a hesitant motion, I pulled the cloth that covered the table, revealing a collection of personal items from former residents. There was a flower-shaped brooch, a pocket watch, and a porcelain doll with a sad expression. Each item seemed to whisper stories of past tragedies. As I touched the brooch, a wave of emotions hit me, as if I were touching the soul of its former owner. The sadness that emanated from it was almost unbearable. These things, they belonged to people who suffered, I murmured to myself, absorbing the gravity of that revelation. A wave of compassion washed over me, but soon, fear mingled with that compassion. I knew I was about to unleash something. I decided it was time to perform the ritual we found in the diary. The yellowed, worn paper had promised me a chance to free the souls. But at what cost? A part of me hesitated, but the need to understand what was happening, to make sense of those voices and shadows, propelled me forward. I returned to my room and prepared everything with Sarah. The atmosphere was charged. The tension was so thick it felt like we could cut it with a knife. "Are you ready for this, Jake?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling but determined. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I can't ignore this any longer. We need to do this together." She nodded, her eyes shining with the determination I admired. We began to arrange the items we needed: candles, a bowl of water, and the things we found in the basement. Once everything was ready, we sat in a circle, the candles lit around us. "Now let us invoke the souls," I said, my voice firm, but inside me was a whirlwind of uncertainty. As we began to recite the words of the ritual, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing some candles. The atmosphere changed abruptly, and the light from those that remained flickered erratically, as if a spirit was manifesting. "Jake, what is happening?" Sarah asked, her expression a mix of fear and fascination. The floor seemed to vibrate beneath our feet, and the voices that were once whispers now became screams. "What do you desire?" A voice echoed, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Fear transformed into an intense pressure in my chest, as if all those lost souls were joining together in a desperate outcry. Then, without warning, everything went dark. The voices became a deafening whirlwind, and I found myself being pulled into a vision. It was as if the space around me disintegrated, forcing me to relive memories I never wanted to confront. And deep within that darkness, I knew I was about to face something that would change everything I thought I knew about myself. The air was heavy and dense as I found myself immersed in memories I hadn't chosen to recall. The basement, with its damp walls and the smell of mildew, transformed into a backdrop of my childhood. Every object I touched led me to a fragment of memories I was trying to forget. The dim light of a hanging bulb swayed gently, casting shadows that danced like specters in search of liberation. I could hear the distant echo of laughter and screams, and for a moment, I wondered if they were echoes of the past or something more sinister. "Jake, are you okay?" Sarah's voice broke the tense silence around me. She was by my side, her worried gaze reflecting the unease I felt. "No, I don't know. It's like I'm reliving everything all over again," I replied, my voice trembling. I could feel the pressure in my chest, as if each breath became a heavier burden. "We need to keep going. We can't give up now. You've been through so much," she said, placing a comforting hand on my arm. With a hesitant nod, I moved forward. The basement seemed to transform with each step I took. The walls were now covered in old photographs, each depicting a moment of happiness that counterbalanced the pain I knew. One picture in particular caught my eye, a photo of a child with a radiant smile, holding a doll. It was a version of myself I hadn't seen in years, and the feeling of loss hit me like a punch to the gut. "Jake?" Sarah called, her voice now softer, almost a whisper. "Who is that child?" "It's me, I think." I didn't know if the answer was for me or for her. But it wasn't supposed to be this way. You need to confront this. What happened to you, to your family? It's the only way to free the souls. Sarah was right. I knew that to release those lost souls, I needed to confront what I had always tried to hide. The atmosphere around us seemed to shift, a rising energy enveloping me. I looked toward the back of the basement and saw something move in the shadows. With a supernatural pull, I was drawn to that dark corner as the memories grew more vivid. The room was filled with personal belongings, broken toys, dusty clothes, and in the center, a wooden box where I knew the truth was kept. "Jake, don't get too close," Sarah shouted, but I was already there, my hand outstretched to open the box. As I lifted it, a sharp cold coursed through my body. What I found inside were not just objects, but fragments of a shattered life, letters, photographs, and a worn diary that seemed to belong to my mother. "I can't do this," I murmured, feeling the weight of guilt and pain about to crush me. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes filled with understanding. "You can, Jake. You need to. It's not just for the souls, but for yourself." With a deep breath, I opened the diary. The pages were filled with notes, some revealing family secrets I had never known. "I can't deal with this," I said, my voice breaking. "You already are dealing with it. You just need to accept it," Sarah replied, her determination giving me strength. As I read, a shadow formed behind me, a familiar presence that made me freeze. I turned slowly and saw her. It was a distorted version of myself, a figure shrouded in darkness, representing everything I had repressed. Her gaze, a reflection of my own, was both familiar and terrifying. "Just face it, Jake," the shadow whispered, her voice echoing like a lament. "You can't escape what's inside you." What I felt was a storm of emotions. The desire to flee and the need to confront my truth were at odds. But Sarah's encouraging look made me realize that facing this shadow was the only way forward. "I'm ready," I declared, my voice firmer now. "I'm ready to confront whatever this is." I took a deep breath, trying to find courage as the shadow approached. The darkness seemed to materialize into a distorted shape of myself, like a shattered reflection in a fogged-up mirror. There was anger, pain, and above all, a deep sadness in the dark eyes that stared back at me. "You can't ignore me forever, Jake," the shadow whispered, its voice echoing like a lost lament. It was as if every word was imbued with a guilt I had carried for so long. "I am not you," I shouted, my voice trembling. "I am not this pain." But as I spoke, I felt the line between us fading away. The shadow let out a dark laugh, a sound that reverberated in my chest. "You can't escape who you really are. You hide behind books, studies, but deep down, you know you can't run away." Those words cut like a sharp blade. I remembered the tragedy that had shaped my childhood, the accident that had plunged my family into a deafening silence. I recalled the guilt I felt for surviving, for being the last to see my brother. "I couldn't save him," I murmured, more to myself than to the shadow. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly," the distorted figure replied, its eyes burning with a dark fire. "And now you're stuck here, just like them." With a gesture, the shadow pointed to the walls of the basement, where lost souls clustered, like specters waiting for release. I could feel their sorrow, an echo of what I had kept buried inside. "This can't be true," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't carry this forever." But as I spoke, I realized that the battle was not just against the shadow, but against the pain I had accumulated over the years. "I need to find a way to break free." "Then face me," the shadow challenged, its form writhing as if ready to devour every piece of me. "Face the truth you have been avoiding." I hesitated, but deep down, I knew there was no other way out. With a hesitant step, I moved toward the figure. "I confront you," I shouted, and the darkness around me seemed to tremble. The shadow advanced, and each step I took echoed into an endless abyss. "You can't defeat me, Jake. You are me." But instead of backing down, I remembered everything I had lost, the memories that haunted me, and the pain I had kept hidden. "You are not who I am. I am more than this." The moment the words left my mouth, I felt a surge of energy course through the space. The shadow hesitated, and in that moment of weakness, I attacked it. Through a scream that echoed like a lament, I confronted it, each word transforming into a spell of release. "I forgive myself. I forgive." The shadow began to dissolve, like smoke vanishing into the air. The pain I carried seemed to dissipate, and with every fragment that disappeared, a new relief took its place. The basement lit up, and the souls, one by one, began to rise, expressing gratitude with their thankful gazes. The light emanating from them felt like a warm embrace. But before I could allow myself to relax, an ancient force erupted, a tremor that shook the walls of the house. The ground beneath my feet opened up, and I realized that the release of the souls was not the end, but the beginning of something greater. The door of the house slowly opened, a bright light escaping through the cracks, revealing new mysteries yet to come. "Jake!" Sarah's voice echoed, and I searched for her, realizing she was there, witnessing the entire transformation. But even as the joy of freeing the souls enveloped me, a doubt whispered in my mind. What else did the house hold? The shadow, now reduced to invisible fragments, still resonated within me, reminding me that the struggle was not over. I had faced my pain, but the past was still there, intertwined with every step I would take toward the future. With one last look at the illuminated basement, I realized that the house still had secrets to reveal, and I was ready to discover them.